And here we are for another round of Ask Tom Live right here on Facebook Live and YouTube Live too, for that matter. Usually we do this without the picture, but picture if you will. On the radio, on Sports Radio 610, I answer home improvement questions Saturdays from 9 to noon and Sundays 8 to 11 for the most part, unless the Texans are playing an early game. We got a few weeks left of the Texans, so that goes from 7 until 9, and it's really 8.
Mr. Tynan, it's
really 8 to 10 because of the time change.
It's actually 8 to 11 this week because it's a bye week, so it's a full show.
I'm good with
Sunday.
that. So it's 8 to 11 this week.
Yeah. So sleep in. You don't have to be up for 7. So anyway,
yeah. Okay. Fine.
You may continue. Sorry, sir.
And we have Danny, who does the garden show before me on Saturday from 7 to 9. And you can listen to him on Sports Radio 610 also. And he does a great job helping you with all your gardening and home improvement stuff when it comes to the outside, around the house. Most of the stuff he deals with, it's green in color. That's about right. And, of course, we have Charlie Mosier here who's going to take over and do some other stuff with us, too. He's the boss. He's the one that runs it. Someday, if you don't see me, it's because of him.
No, nice.
We'll be fine there. How's that?
Nice. That's right, Tom, because I know people.
Yeah. That's the end of me.
That's it. All right. Now, Tom and I are joined at the hip. We have been for years, and enjoyed every minute of it, and we enjoy helping you. It's why we're here every Thursday. We're actually, truth be told, I just want to be completely transparent. We had to record this yesterday, so this is recorded Wednesday for airing today on Thursday. Just to be clean with you about that, because of some scheduling conflicts. Last week we missed a show, and we didn't want to miss 2 in a row. So that's why we went to the trouble of recording this for you. So what we're going to do
It's no trouble.
It's no trouble.
Yes.
We live to serve.
I'm good with it. As long as I can be here, I'll be here with you.
It's a reason why this is so close to our heart. So anyway,
the right one there. I got the right hand. Okay,
but
yes.
we're gonna answer questions you sent us this week from the AskTom box there at homeshowradio.com. It's right there on the homepage. And if you'd like, as a matter of fact, let's go ahead and show you that right now. If you go over there to homeshowradio.com, you'll see that there's that big blue button there. It says Ask Tom. Click on that. You'll come to this page next where you can decide whether you want to write us a question or send us a video. We don't get a lot of videos. Feel free, though. But fill that form and send us pictures because it helps us answer questions, as you will see if you see any of our daily Ask Tom videos that we place at homeshowradio.com. We put a new one up every day. So there you go. But before we get to all that, we like to start by giving you a roundup of what's news around the corner and up your block with all the news that's fit to schmooze. And this week, Tom, is actually, I came across this one by chance this morning when I was preparing, because it was one of those moments where I was like, what are we going to talk about today? So I happened to come across
every morning for me.
So this is, I guess we could have a breaking news theme, but this is kind of new. The renters are coming. And by that,
big time, yes.
Yeah, what I mean is that according to the Wall Street Journal, single-family homes that are built for rent are emerging as one of the hottest corners of investments in the U.S. property market, as investors are responding to the booming demand for home seekers who are priced out of for-sale housing. And that's kind of a problem. People not buying a house. But in the meantime, in every problem, there's an opportunity. And in Houston right now, the median price of a home sold in March went for 16% more than last year, according to Houston Association of Realtors. And these are historically high prices, and the steep down payment requirements and all that, Tom, are driving people to keep renting, even as rents continue to rise. And they are on the rise. Rent homes the rent-on homes are rising faster than ever right now, because a lot more young people are realizing that we'd rather have a house than an apartment. So what's happened as a result of that is that builders are building to rent, because the expected return on investment for a rent house is about 8%, making it one of the highest of 18 sectors tracked by Green Street, which is a firm that tracks these things. According to the Wall Street Journal again, the average return for a property that's built to sell, on the other hand, is 6.1%. That's why there have been over 100,000 built to rent houses started construction this year alone. So here's the trend that we need to watch out for is number one, the, hang on a second, where is it? Here it is. The trend is, according to the Houston Chronicle, 1 in 4 houses in the Houston area is sold by or purchased by an investor who's going to turn it into a rent house. That's more than 7,500 built-to-rent homes have already gone up in the Houston area. And that means what that's going to lead to ultimately is a lot more of this kind. The Chronicle, for instance, says D.R. Horton built 124 rent houses just north of the Woodlands. It leased them and put them out on the market and sold the entire kit and caboodle to investors. And their winning bid was $31.8 million, which net them 79% more than the cost to build, market, and sell them. And when you compare that to the cost that they normally would make on that, it's their normal margin would be 31%. So that's why the renters are coming.
Yeah, and this goes back historically. If you go all the way back to the 20s and 30s, a lot of you remember a movie with Jimmy Stewart, and it was this old building savings and loan company that
it's a wonderful
started
life.
building
Right.
Wonderful Life, building these little homes and putting the Potter guy, who was the renter guy that owned all the property, out of business, and there was a big problem. That's the way it's going to be now because less people can afford to buy. So you're going to have these big conglomerates that will be renting entire communities, and you're going to be subjected to what they have to offer and what their rents are. And it can get out of hand, as it did back at the turn of the century, way back when. So we've got to take a close look at that because people didn't really start owning their homes en masse until after World War II, when we had such a capacity of building materials. They could keep the prices down. And Charlie, I know you're familiar with that subdivision up in New Jersey when they started building these tract homes for returning
Long
veterans
Island,
from
actually,
World War II.
Levittown you're talking about.
Levittown, excuse me,
Right.
absolutely.
On Long Island,
and that
yeah.
kind of set the whole thing, and that's where slabs came from and everything else, because it was all because it was constructed for war use, and now we had to find something to do with it. I think we're going back into that time again. So I have actually even considered building and buying and rehabbing and renting homes for making some extra income myself. It's that popular right now. If I'm thinking about it, everybody is.
Well, one of the builders they quoted, I think it was D.R. Horton, said that they're actually building houses now to rent
Yes.
where they never would have built a house to sell because they
Yeah,
know that
and think
they
about
can
it.
package it up.
Well, and you can make the package very affordable, very easy to build. It can still be a good home, but a renter doesn't care as long as everything's working. And it won't have a lot of bells and whistles, and you won't have all those little things that people insist on when they're building a custom home. And people will rent them, and you have monthly income. We have a great sponsor, Bruce Leslie, Houston for Lease, who's in the property management business. He does that, and he's been doing it for years. There is money to be made and an income to be made for many people of different levels. You can have 3 houses or you can have 300, depending what kind of income you want. But if you have a little investment cash, it's not a bad place to think about it. At least I don't think so. I
So
think it's a
something
good-
to think
good thought.
about in twofold is number one, beware if any of these are coming into your, like if you're living out, like they said, this one was built north of Conroe. And part of the reason they made those houses attractive to these renters is there were good schools there. Well, there are people moved there because there were no rent houses because they have good schools. Now there are rent houses there. So is this going to attract a different? What effect is this going to have on neighborhoods? There's going to be a lot to watch on this.
I don't know.
But this is the moment of a sea change in construction. That's the point of the story. So
You
watch that. And that is what we've got in the news this week. And we'll have another one of those next week. So, Tom, let's get right to the questions this week. Our first question comes to us from Lumberton, North Carolina, and that's where we find Cindy. She writes, the ridge vents on my house allow pine tree seeds and large amounts of pollen into my attic. I can't remove the trees. How do I prevent this? I've also seen vents on the gable ends, which I just learned from your video, should be covered. Can I use foam insulation in my attic to cover the ridge vent? What do you suggest?
Well, one of the things you want to do with the gable vents, if you have a ridge vent, soffit vent, which is a very good thing to have, is you don't want the air blowing across. So what you put some kind of obstruction up behind it, whether it's tar paper, some visqueen, it could be a piece of styrofoam that they use in some sheathing package. It's just something to keep the wind from blowing in so it stays still in there so the air moves from the soffit to the ridge. So it's not a hermetically sealed thing. Now her question is hermetically sealed related. She's getting pollen, which will drive a lot of people crazy, but any kind of vent system on any roof at all will never keep the pollen out. And quite frankly, if you open a door, window, or anything else, pollen's getting in. So that's something you have to deal with on a different level. But I wouldn't remove a ridge vent because you think it's getting in the house that way, and then all of a sudden you're allergy free. It's not going to work. I would probably try to look at it a little differently to make sure that the house is tight. You don't have holes to the attic. You don't go up in there because pollen is everywhere. You get it on your clothes. You bring it in. You don't even know it, and you're contaminating your house in so many different ways.
Is there any way to put like a screen on those ridge vents or something?
Not to keep pollen out. Have you ever pollen, Charlie? Is
true.
Dust. It's like that. We have a cutting edge tile removal to keep all the thin set dust out of your house. That's like pollen too. It'll go. I don't care if you put plastic up or whatever. It'll get in because it's just going with the wind, and you'd have to have one of those masks that a lot of people have been wearing for the last year.
The K97, whatever you call them.
Yeah, whatever it's called. You'd have to have one of those all over your house. Put a big one on the house.
Right.
Maybe Fauci will say that, recommend that.
I think one of the misconceptions about attic ventilation, Tom, is the idea that people go up there and say, "Well, I don't feel it moving. I don't feel a breeze." And
good.
And with those, and with the gable vents, it's built in an old school way that there is air moving through, and that's not necessarily a good thing. It's like cutting a hole in a straw where your ridge vents are concerned.
It's true, and you want the air to move very slowly. It's not to cool your body so you can go up there and just hang out and watch TV. You have ceiling fans in your living room and stuff for that. But it's so the air moves right against the bottom of the roof decking, and what happens is it becomes a sponge. And the moisture in the rest of that very still air gets sucked into the hotter air because as it heats, it rises. And what it's doing is removing all the moisture. So it's just like a sponge, and what it's doing is collecting, and then it eliminates it to the outside. So your insulation stays dry, and you get the full art value out of your insulation. It's not cooling your attic, although there's a little residual to it, but it's really releasing the heat and the water.
And that's the key.
Yes.
Dale has a water issue in Grove City, Ohio. He says, I have a metal awning patio on my own. He says, and I converted it into a 3-season room, and I'm getting a lot of condensation on the underside, dripping all over. What would be the best insulation for it, and would it hurt to leave air circulation between the insulation and the corrugated metal awning? And I know the answer to that one, Tom, because we've answered this so many times. Yeah.
Yeah, and you could probably visit Mueller Steel Building's website, and they probably even have a section on this. But all steel buildings have an insulation package that goes right up against the backside of the metal on the inside of the building. Or certain times of the year, it's going to reach dew point, and then that vapor that we talked about getting out of the attic, just the question before, now becomes a liquid. And it starts to drip just like it would on any kind of cold can, or depends what's hot and cold, where the moisture is. If it's warmer inside, is more water in the warm air, so it's gonna sweat too. So what you have to do is insulate. The answer to his other question is don't put it with an airspace in between, but take that insulation, put right up against it. And you can buy this insulation at a metal building store if you have some in your area. I know they're not in the Houston area. Texas, there's Mueller Steel buildings all over, but it's a thin fiberglass with a vinyl on either side, and it just goes right up against there. And lots of times they just use wire, or you can strap it up however you want to. It won't be pretty, so you might want to put a finished ceiling underneath there, and that way you have something nice to look at. But yes, you've got to insulate the inside of metal buildings. Even if you go to one of our ports in the United States, Port of Houston, that many of us in Houston here are familiar with, they have huge metal buildings where they're storing everything when it finally comes off the boats. And when you go in there, you'll see it all insulated. Well, it gets 110 degrees in there in the summertime. It's Gulf Coast, it's Houston, but it keeps it from sweating on all the merchandise that they're holding in there to finally move with the truckers finally go back to work and all that good stuff. And you know how that's working because we're not smart enough to understand it. But as far as that goes, at least it's staying dry in that building. What? It's true in the ports. They're having a big hard time with
political
that.
third rail just keeps calling to us, but we're resisting it.
Well, it's in the news, all about the supply chain. I don't care who's Washington. I don't care about that.
Even
The
though we have a
supply
lot
chain
of-
is something is really difficult.
Now, we have a lot of independent operator truck drivers who would be happy to go to
absolutely.
the ports, but there's this little problem with unions. So, but let's not go there because we're gonna get hate mail.
I was going to say, it's not one person's fault. It's the whole system came back to
Yeah.
bite everybody.
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
exactly. We're not- our next question.
It just is. Yes.
Let's run off to North Dakota. Blake writes to us. He says, "My attic has soffit vents and 2 electric fans. I hate those darn fans for various reasons. One being the need to replace the motors when they burn out." We've heard that before.
Yes.
What
Yes.
is the best way to move forward? Simply shut off the breaker to the electric fans and install a ridge vent?
Yes. The answer is yes. But I want to hit on a couple of remarks here, which I find fascinating because people don't realize that electric power vents should never be used in an attic. Now, I said electric power vents. The fact of the matter is they burn out. Why? Because they can't move enough air and the motors overheat because they're fan motors who need to move a lot more air than it's possible. And so they burn out all the time. Now, a quick fix that we've always recommended people before they get their new roof, you might be 5 years away from a roof or whatever, and I wouldn't tell you to put a ridge vent on an older roof that's going to be replaced because you're kind of wasting your money and you can't reuse it, is to just remove the motors and let those vents just be passive vents. Just let them go ahead and have a 12-inch hole and let the air go out and leave it at that until your new roof comes in. But ridge vents, soffit vents, replace all of those gizmos and gadgets. If you're going to have any power vent at all, especially today, they're easy to get and they're very common. Use the solar ones. They'll run when the sun's out and do what they need to do, but they don't burn out because it's not an electric motor. It's a little bit different. So as far as that goes, they work much better if you need one. Quite frankly, if you have an old typical home with a lot of ridge and a lot of soffit, ridge vents and soffit vents are the way to go.
Now, we've talked about anybody who's listened to us for more than 15 minutes when this topic comes up. You know, we talk about the 3 things that we put in an attic in the Gulf Coast, which would be insulation, ventilation, and a radiant barrier. The radiant barrier isn't necessarily something for North Dakota, is it?
Oh, no, not at all. There would be no reason at all because in North Dakota, just the biggest example, is you don't designed for extremes. You design for the whole year and where you're going to get your greatest savings, and that would be their heating season. And so their R values are so great because it gets very cold there. If you've never been there, it does. A radiant barrier would be worthless to them. And in the summertime, even though it can get hot inside and they have air conditioning, the R value is so high, the radiant barrier would do little to nothing to affect, in a good way or a bad way for that matter, any kind of cooling costs because the R values are way beyond anything we would use, say, here in Houston in the Gulf Coast area. And so that's why radiant barriers are more important. Plus, we design for our overall, which would be summer, which is the cooling season, not the heating season. So it's totally opposite. But just back real quick to finish this, conduction, convection, and radiation. That's how heat transfers. In the Gulf Coast area, radiation is 80% of the heat gain on a home, and that's coming directly from the sun. Convection is the air currents that remove the water with your attic ventilation. Conduction is the hot to cold separation, which they do in North Dakota, and that's the insulation on the floor of the attic, which makes that separation so that heat resistant time, that R value, stops the heat from transferring one way or the other. For North Dakota, it's keeping the heat in. In Houston, we have less of that and the radiant barrier to keep the heat out.
Conduction, radiation,
convection,
convection, conduction, radiation.
Radiation.
Okay. Not
That's
the kind that makes you
three
glow.
ways. Yeah, that's the 3 ways that heat moves, and heat is energy.
Right. This is why Tom doesn't own a microwave oven.
I do not. Another political statement.
No, that's a lifestyle.
No,
choice.
it's true. I don't. A health statement. I'm the kitchen New Deal. I want good food.
He's the green. He's the green. His Green New Deal includes a love of Brussels sprouts.
Yes, and kale and all that good stuff. So
Oh my God,
I'm
you're
good
on
with
kale
that.
now?
Kale is my favorite, and
Okay,
cucumbers.
if you show up here driving a Prius, so help me God.
We had one. We just sold it.
know.
Sandra
I
got the
know.
Honda.
I know.
It was actually
Yeah.
a good car, but it was too small.
A Prius to Honda. That's not really an advancement one way or the other. It's kind of
It was a Toyota to a
yeah,
Honda.
there it is. All right. Okay, question goes Lake Jackson with Ron. He writes to us, we just had a wooden fence replaced with cedar. And we've heard various things about applying a sealer or sealant to make it last. I think I know where he's heard some of that. He said, what is your opinion about putting this kind of sealant on a deck? He says, or a fence rather. I respect your opinion.
I think there's a lot of good sealers out there you could use, and I hope you want to use them a lot because you'll have to do it every 2 to 3 years. And with a fence, it sounds great when you first start, but you get a little lazy. You get other priorities in your life that happen with your home, like roofing and maybe new windows and your kitchen remodel or bathroom remodel. You're going to be doing other things, and you don't want to go out and keep restaining that fence all the time because it's not going to hold up, and that's why people don't do it. That's why for the majority of the people, we just recommend let it weather. It weathers as evenly as it can. It looks natural. It matches everybody else's. That's fine. But if you really want to look it nice, you can stain it. You want to make it look nice and last longer, you can paint it like they do up north in other parts of the country. But the fact of the matter is it's going to be a maintenance issue that you're going to start. And the minute you stop, when that stain starts to fade along with the wood discoloring, it's going to look all badly. How's that for a word? All badly.
All badly. Wicked badly.
All badly.
Yeah.
Wicked badly. Sure, why not?
Well, I'm here to testify. When we
Yes.
bought our house, 10 years ago, the guy, when he put it up for sale, he went and put that whatever that seal stuff is, all along
There's
the
a lot
fence,
of
and
them.
it looked like $1 million. About 5 years later, it looked bad.
Mm-hmm.
And about 6 months ago, a storm almost blew the fence over. Yes, we lived with an ugly fence for 5 years. And because somebody in the house was too cheap to replace it, and
Yes.
until he had to. But I'm here to tell you, it may have looked like $1 million in the end, but I wouldn't give you 10 cents for what it looked like in the end. It just was not.
Wait, you said the end twice. It looked great in the beginning. Now it
In the
didn't
beginning,
look
it
good
looked
at
like
the
$1 million
end.
in the
Yes.
beginning. Thank you, but I wouldn't give
Yeah.
you 10 cents. Thank you for what it looked like in the end. It's just
No fence is gonna look good.
Hey, unless you want to keep maintaining it and putting it on there, and then I'm sure it would continue to look like $1 million. I don't know how much it would cost you
Until
to do
it
that.
blows over, it's still going to
Until-
rot and do stuff.
That's
But,
exactly right.
You know what? People don't have that discipline to keep doing it, and I don't blame them. I wouldn't keep doing it, but you get that charge at the beginning, like, oh yeah, I'm going to do it. I don't care, and you just give up on it.
I'll tell you what. We had a fence. I had a fence in another house before Sandy and I got married and moved into this house 10 years ago. It's a long story. But anyway, in my last house, I had just a regular fence going down the property line. And I had somebody come out and power wash it one time.
Yeah.
Didn't seal it, just power washed it. And it looked like $1 million again. I mean, maybe, okay, $500,000. But I mean, but
But no,
it looked
it'll clean up
a whole
nice.
lot better. Right. And so, the money, I think, in my opinion, Tom, following up what you said, I think if you power wash that fence periodically, when it starts looking a little maybe janky to you, it'll bring it back and look beautiful for a while. So
I think it's a great idea, Charlie. And we should wash our homes every 4 or 5 years too with a power washer, the driveways, all
Right.
this. So hit it all at one time. It's not going to cost that much unless you have a huge property with millions of feet of fence. But if it's a small suburban home, they can power wash that thing in 2 hours, and it's going to look good.
it's like, bathing once a week. I mean, it's like you should bathe at least once a week.
Yes, you should every day.
I saw an interview with Benedict
Yes.
Cumberbatch or whatever, Cumbersnatch or whatever his name is, this weekend, and he was filming a movie. I think it's streaming on Netflix. I think that's what he was pimping on the news. And to get into character, he only bathed once a week.
Okay?
Yeah.
That's why I'm not in the movies. I don't want to work with people like that.
You know, that's the one of many reasons neither of us are in the movies. So
You
I
can
don't wanna-
fake it, you know?
Right.
Okay.
See,
fine.
I'd much rather do the investment Chris Pratt did to be in that was a Galaxy thing when he lost all that weight and kept it off. I think now that I would do to be in the movies.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think I'd go with a fat part either.
No. Yeah. Okay.
It's too hard to
Lynn-
lose it. I mean, to lose it after you're done.
It's true. Lynn in Ocean Isle Beach, North Carolina, has a question. This one has a riddle wrapped within it. He says, I need your advice on replacing, or she says, I need your advice on replacing a few pilings at my home. I need to install a few if possible before a terminal groin is installed near my home. I want to stay with wood to match the existing ones. So, just in case y'all don't know, this is a terminal groin. That row of
I had no
rocks,
idea that's what it's called.
That's it.
But it's
called-
like a retaining wall that sits out in the ocean. Okay, fine.
right. And
It
here's
absorbs the energy. Yeah, I know what it does. I
Right,
just
right.
noticed-
It keeps
didn't know it was a groin.
exactly. It's supposed to control erosion, but
Yeah.
here's the thing: as I was researching this before, as I have want to do from time to time, I found out that these were illegal in North Carolina for a long time. They banned them because they found they did irreparable damage to the beaches. So apparently they're allowing them again. I don't know the reason why, but that's the deal. So Tom, over to you. What's your advice on getting
Well-
groin aside?
Yes.
What's your advice on her staying with wooden ones to match the existing ones, and what's involved in changing out those pilings?
Yeah, first off, I want to say in Galveston Island, for those of our Estonian friends watching this, they're not allowed on the west end of the island either, because what they do is they put them out and they protect the neighborhood. But on the outside, when they finally decide to stop it, so they have to find a place to stop putting these. What happens is that all that energy finally finds a way around there and just eats up the entire island, beach, whatever case may be, on the outside of them.
That's exactly
so
right.
That's why you'll see them only in certain areas like along Galveston City, and then they stop, and after that, everybody's
Right.
on their own.
Yeah,
so,
but and in fact, that's what I've read in the research about it is that they they protected this area, but they did irreparable harm to everything on the outside of them.
Right, so it's better not to have them, and everybody just gets a little all the time until you finally lose 1 row, 2 row, 3 rows, and that's just the way it works on Galveston Island.
You're living
when I
on
was
the
out
beach,
there.
baby.
Yeah, that's why I was 3 rows back and ended up being 1.5 back when I sold it. Now, as far as these go in most cases with the barrier islands or any type of island structures out there, they're on sand. And so and I'm real familiar with the Texas barrier island system, so I'll hit on that, and then I'm going to give you a tip in case it's a little different in different areas of the country. But what you do is you actually go, for every foot up out of the ground, you go 1.5 feet down. That means you have a big long piling to put in there. But don't worry, it's not as bad as it sounds, because what they do is they water inject, and they actually stick that piling down on the side, and then they spin it and lift it up and pull it up to the house. Now, the whole time the house has got temporary support under it so it doesn't fall during the process. Then they tie it together, leave it for a couple days, the water in the ground dries up, and that sand sucks around there, and it's all done. It's not going anywhere, and that's how all those homes are built on a lot of barrier islands. Now, in some areas, you get on rivers, you get on these stilt homes in different parts of the country. Every area has got different soils. So you always have to talk to the people in your area, find out what the procedure is. But I don't think 2 pilings, getting it replaced, is going to be as bad as you think. But there are different situations in different areas depending what kind of soil you're on around any kind of waterfront stilt home situations.
Okay, so, but you would stay with the wooden if she has wooden ones now.
You're going to match what's there, and wood has always been a mainstay. You put it in there, and it's in there right. It gives a little bit, but isn't that the best part, is it does give a little bit, and it's down so deep that even if you get a bad storm and it goes away, you notice the pilings are always up. It's the rest of the house that's gone from the wind. But the pilings stay in place because they're so deep that even the ocean water and the storm surge doesn't go that deep unless it gets really bad for a long period of time.
Yeah, there's a song in there. I think I've heard. Can't remember who it is. It give a little bit or something.
Song.
Yeah.
Okay.
Anyway. when you spend the first half of your life playing records on the radio, if somebody says something, you're like, oh, there's a song. Anyway, all right.
Okay.
Well, hey, you know what? That's the time we have today for answering questions, Tom. And we will be back again next week. In the meantime, though, if you want to send us some of your questions, in the meantime, you can go use the Ask Tom form right over there. My camera's backwards, so it throws me off. Anyway, click the blue button. It takes you to this page where you can then choose a video or writing and then fill the form out and send us pictures in. Like we had a picture of Lynn's groin. It wasn't Lynn's groin, but, a groin near Lynn.
Okay.
You know what I'm trying to say here? Anyway.
Yeah. And I was going down the wrong road, right? Okay, fine.
Well,
I'll take the political road any day over the groin road.
Well, why don't you tell them where the road leads you this weekend?
The road leads me this weekend from my studio in Brownsville, Texas, down here on the border, which is now open, and the traffic is terrible because everybody's coming over here to buy Christmas presents in Brownsville. And I will be doing the show from 7 to 9 on Saturday. And as I was just told, from 8 to 11. That's not 7 to 9, that's Danny. 9 to 12 on Saturday. And I was just told on Sunday, 8 to 11, because the Texans have a bye week. And of course, Danny Milliken will be on from 7 to 9. He's the guy that gets it all started on Saturday morning. We continue on till 11 on Sunday, not necessarily without a break in between, but it's home improvement and gardening all weekend long in the morning on Sports Radio 610.
All right. Now, before we go, this just in from That'll Leave a Mark department. Are you ready? Brace yourself.
Yes. Doesn't look good. Oh.
Ow!
And
Now,
I thought my groin hurt. Oh.
I wouldn't have played it if we didn't know that he walked away from it. So, but anyway.
Really? Oh,
Yeah.
boy.
So just in the future, be careful when you leave. This is why we recommend calling our home show pros. Just saying. All right.
Please. And you know what, Charlie, just on that note, I'm a tool guy all the way, right? Saws and nail guns and everything. A chainsaw scares me more than any other tool on the market. It just is so harmless looking, and it is so deadly.
You know, the only way I'd pick one up is if I said right beforehand, here, hold my beer.
Yeah.
There's not a chance. All right. We'll see you all next week.
Got a question? Ask Tom on Home Show Radio. Home Show Radio. Free advice from a pro who knows. Home Show